the Providence Community Library System. We're doing this program in coordination with them, and it's always a great pleasure to do programming with the library, the Providence Community Libraries, because they are just everywhere in Providence. They're in every little nook and cranny in Providence, and we just know that access to the programming is maximized, and it's really a wonderful organization to work with, and I so look forward to working with them again and again and again. We've been doing it for multiple years now. Okay, so we're going to go on to the filmmaker. So we normally in the film fest we do this live, but we, due to the pandemic, we're doing this Zoomy, and so we have this wonderful film, Beauty on the Wing: Life Story of a Monarch Butterfly. It's directed by Kim Smith, and I want to welcome Kim Smith here today. Welcome, Kim.
Hello, Eric. Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you, and it's a pleasure to have your film be a part of our lineup. It's been very well attended as far as hitting the screen here online, and I want to encourage anyone that has a question today to use the raising your hand on the reaction button. There's a little hand raise. If you use that, then we'll get to your question, and in case somebody's unmuted, but try to use that function. And if you have a question or comment about the film, and that's one thing I want to say. A lot of times people don't have a question per se, but the comments are just as important to hear as anything else. So so I'm going to just begin to say, I need to say this, is that I needed this movie in my festival this year just for my sanity. This was such an antidote to me of distracting myself from what was going on with COVID and the election and the protest, and just sitting down and watching a great documentary about a butterfly did the trick for me. It was a very zen and meditative moment for me, and I really, yeah, it was one of those where the time of watching it and the film matched really well, and it's a great film, and I'm really happy to have it in the lineup, because I also think it's a great way that kids can understand the life of the butterfly, but also understand and appreciate the importance of the monarch butterfly in a larger context. So I just great job of getting people to think about the important small things in life in order to put these bigger things into context. Kim, I really got into it that way.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you. Those are very kind words. Thank you.
Sure. No. And part of the reason I found it meditative is your style, your filmmaking style, where you let the scenes play out, not necessarily filling every scene with narration or some type of let's follow the storyline. You just basically, we end up on butterfly time. We end up on just basically being able to just watch the butterfly land where it's going to land, do what it's going to do, and then go away, and without being told, well, this is when the butterfly lands and starts to feed on the different. And I found that that was very appealing to me, because it allowed you to just kind of just be in a butterfly moment and not being told this is what's happening. And although it was a super informative film to me, because of the information you provided in other parts with narration, but it was well balanced between the non-narrative and the narrative parts, where I was into it and also learned from it without feeling I was in school or something like that, something.
Let's see, the person who I worked with who helped me finish the film, Eric, his name's also Eric.
Okay.
He was very conscious of that as well. Like he didn't, because I talked to him a great deal about that. Like, is there, do you think we need to add more narration here? And he was like, no, it's dense enough, but we'll just let this part flow out too. So, it was I edited the film, but then when I brought it to the film finisher, he was very helpful in, sort of like reconfirming things that I had thought about with about the butterfly action and things like that. And then also that beautiful music from Jesse Cook, who that was just a phenomenal find, to find that music that would fill in those spaces that, I either wanted to fill those kind of like longer spaces of the butterfly doing going through its life cycle, especially with either sounds of the of what was happening in the garden around, or in the dunes or the meadows or whatever,
Right.
and also and then kind of supplement that with the music as well. So I think that really made it full. I think that was, yeah, a good way to do it. Yeah.
Oh, I agree. And I was wondering, is there a documentary filmmaker that you know, are inspired by that does something similarly, or maybe it was more Eric's influence of, maybe
You know what? People have asked me that before, and I should have somebody in mind, but
you don't should.
Yes, somebody who does inspire me is Rachel Carson, and she's not a filmmaker, but the way she tells stories about the biological things that are happening on the seashore, and that really inspired me more than anything, I think. So yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, it didn't have to be right. It doesn't have to be another filmmaker.
It doesn't have to be a filmmaker, I guess.
Right.
But yeah, I find her life and her story and her passion and her commitment to be very inspiring. That's what inspires me, I guess.
I have not heard of her, so now I'm looking her up.
Oh, Rachel Carson wrote the seminal book. She was like the first environmentalist in a way. She wrote that book Silent Spring in the 1960s, and she had been working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife for decades, writing books about the life cycle of marine life on the beaches and things like that. When she saw what was happening with songbirds and other types of birds that were dying because of the intense use of DDT. So, and this is when people used to spray DDT over fields,
Right.
and kids would run after the airplane as it was spraying vast areas with DDT. So she wrote that book Silent Spring in 1965. And that was really a turning point. And she was terribly vilified also at the time. Like, people said, what does a woman know? I mean, all the usual things. So, but you can find a lot about Rachel Carson online, but her early books about the life at the edge of the sea really is very inspirational to me. So
Interesting. All right. I thought it was a more contemporary. That's why Rachel Carson, storyteller, somebody. I'm thinking children's storyteller because I'm a children's programmer. But I get, I've definitely heard of her. So any questions out there? I don't want to. I have a ton of questions, but I don't want to be the only one asking. If anyone had a question, raise your hand, and I'm happy to give you a holler. Or if you have a comment or something to say to Kim, do that little hand raise. And while I'm waiting for a hand raise, if the talking about your inspiration, then also, so what kind of research, were you that knowledgeable about about butterflies in general when you were, before starting this film? Were you, is this something that you had to study and basically teach yourself about?
Let's see. I think it was around 2006. I was working on a children's book about monarch butterflies because I design butterfly habitat gardens.
Oh.
And so I'm always looking for more ways to encourage more butterflies to come into the garden. And at that time I had written and illustrated a book on garden design. And so I wanted to, extend that further and be more specific. So I thought, oh, well, I'm really interested in monarchs. So I was working on the illustrations for the monarch book when we were having that year, that in 2006, we had an extraordinary monarch butterfly migration through Eastern Point, down by our lighthouse. And I just thought, and I was out there photographing it thinking, oh, well, in the dead of winter, I'll need more documentation, for the illustrations. And then, but it was so phenomenal. I said, the next time they come through, I'm going to have the ability to document this on film. So I went to our local cable television station and I borrowed some cameras from them. And then from there, I taught myself camera work and then taught myself editing and purchased my own camera because I needed a camera that was very portable to get into, filming, having an interest in photographing and then which turned into filming wildlife. You need something that's relatively lightweight that you can carry around in fields without killing yourself. And then I was very interested in tiny creatures, so I needed something relatively small that I could just zoom right in on and to capture their life cycle. So that's how it started. So then the more I learned about the monarchs, the film and the story was just originally planned to be about the monarchs in their northern breeding ground, but then through the course of working on it, I just got more and more interested in going to Mexico and filming there as well. And just didn't think the movie would be complete without doing that. So in 2014, it was the worst year ever for the butterfly. The lowest numbers ever recorded for the butterflies. The butterflies in 1975, 76, when they were first discovered in Mexico, first discovered by scientists, and the local people knew about the butterflies, but when it was first discovered where they wintered over, the butterflies were counted in the billions. And then today they're counted in the millions. So the population has steadily been in decline. And then in 2014, that was the worst winter ever recorded. So I thought, if I don't go now, I'll never go. So I had the very good fortune to travel with Dr. Thomas Emmel, who was a butterfly population specialist. His specialty was counting butterflies, and he'd been counting butterflies at the Monarch Butterfly Biosphere Reserve since really since the late 70s, early 80s, from the very beginning. And so he was wonderful to travel with. He subsequently passed away, but I did a little interview with him at the top of the mountain at Sierra Chinqua. And so that interview is posted online, but he's really wonderful. He was director of Lepidoptera and biodiversity at the University of Florida in Gainesville. And so it was a great group of people to travel with. And then I went again in 2019 when they were having a big population uptick. So not if you look at a bar graph, it's like up, 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 and then it goes down, down, down. And then the last couple of years, there might be a little up and then a little down, a few more millions of acres that they're covering, but still nowhere near the numbers that there were before. So, and then last year, when the last place we filmed in was extraordinary because it was the most pristine of the monarch sanctuaries. It's at Cerro Pelon, and it's not touristy there at all. I mean, it was just very remote. And the butterflies at that time, they move all around the mountains. They don't just roost in one area and then just stay in that one area all winter long. They move around to different locations. And when we were there, they were at the top of the mountain. So we climbed to the very top of the highest mountain and filmed looking at them down below us. This beautiful butterfly explosions taking place below us. So I don't know if you can really see that sometimes in the footage, but it was really extraordinary perspective to be on top of a mountain looking down at the treetop.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you definitely had a background in butterfly knowledge.
Knowledge more about wildflowers and native plants and things, what to plant to attract butterflies to come into your garden.
Was that where they were filmed, primarily in the gardens that you had designed? Is that most of your footage?
In my gardens, and also in the dunes and in the grass around the milkweed patches around Good Harbor Beach. And also Eastern Point. There's a couple of wild common milkweed patches there. So there's a lot of films where you see butterflies pupating, and they're pupating in a terrarium in a laboratory. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to show I wanted people to see how beautiful it was in nature,
Sure.
to see the life cycle unfold in a natural scene.
Right.
Not even the most famous butterfly movie, all the life cycle scenes are filmed in a glass case, you know what I mean?
Most
So,
famous butterfly movie.
I think it's called The Flight of Butterflies, or
Okay.
it came out about, I don't know, it came out while I was working on my film, and you know that whenever that happens, you're always like, oh, okay. But then mine took so much longer to come out, it didn't really matter. People had forgotten about it already. So
I don't think there can be too many movies about butterflies. In fact, that was one of the things I also found commendable about your film, is that you were covering other species of butterflies and other wild animals that coexist or maybe are
yeah, because
feeding on the
doesn't,
butterflies.
right, it doesn't like happen in a vacuum, like this beautiful migration. We're part of this beautiful movement of life that's always around us, especially if we live on a flyway like in Rhode Island or here in on Cape Ann. We're part of the Atlantic flyway, so there's this extraordinary movement of life that takes place all the time. It's always there. It's always this beautiful undercurrent. And whether it's creatures migrating northward or creatures migrating southward, or it's ocean creatures like whales moving north and south, and it's just this, you know, it's just this beautiful movement up and down, up and down every year. It's so beautiful that I'm so fascinated with migration. I just
Yep.
think it's like, and how all these species have adapted to, because really that's what the monarchs are. They're really a tropical species that has learned to adapt to, like when they first emerge in Mexico after sleeping through the winter, they're following the blooming path of milkweed. So first milkweed comes into bloom along the Gulf states, and then you know, as the earth warms, the milkweed blooms, and it blooms all the way up through southern Canada.
Is
And so,
milkweed considered an invasive species for New England?
no, it's not. I mean, I think at some point when the early colonists came to this country, everything that prevented their delphiniums and their larkspurs and their beautiful European flowers from growing was labeled a weed.
Right.
So we have milkweed, ironweed, butterfly weed. So all our native plants have a weed attached to the second half of their name, unfortunately. So, but there's over 200 species of milkweed worldwide, and I think about 104 species grow in the United States. So there's different types of milkweed that the butterflies rely on. The best milkweed to grow for monarchs is common milkweed, which grows throughout the Midwest and New England. And that is, if you're interested in planting milkweed, that's truly the females are the most productive on common milkweed. The most successful the highest number of caterpillars emerge or hatch from common milkweed. But common milkweed, excuse me, common milkweed it spreads by underground rhizomes and also by seed. So if you're planting common milkweed, you might get it, like I plant it and I say to my clients, or I just say, now this spot is going to be for common milkweed. And you just give over some section of your garden to common milkweed. So then, but there's also beautiful other types of milkweed, like marsh milkweed, which is almost just as productive as common milkweed, but it's clump forming. So it doesn't spread as vigorously as common milkweed does. So, so it just depends on the location. Even though it's called swamp or marsh milkweed, it grows beautifully in a garden. You don't just have to have a swamp to grow it.
Sure.
So, yeah.
All right. And I just want to make sure any questions out there, anybody, don't feel shy to chime in. And raise your hand if we've talked a lot of different topics here, but
I see a question. Sometimes it looked like you must have been using time-lapse photography when the caterpillars were eating the milkweed leaves. So sometimes what I did was I would let the camera run for hours and then speed it up. So it wasn't really time-lapse. It was just changing the time speed on it. So making turning the clip into, instead of 100%, making it 800 times, 800 times faster. So especially in the scene where the caterpillar is getting ready to hang into a J shape. Now I can turn that into about a 3-minute scene, which when in actuality that takes about an hour. So I just let the camera run the whole entire time, had a huge long hour-long clip, and then just condensed it into 3 minutes. Does that answer your question? That was from Judith.
I get you. You're reading the chat. Good
Yeah,
job.
reading the
Kim.
chat.
I'm got all these different pieces to.
Yeah, you got, yeah.
And who are the children that are in the film at the end?
Oh, my sweet neighborhood kids. And then my granddaughter Charlotte is in the very last clip, but the kids in the neighborhood. Out on my front porch, I have all these terrariums with all different kinds of butterflies and moths and things like that. And so the neighborhood kids are always stopping by and looking. And one day I knew a whole bunch were going to emerge that day. And so you can tell they all look a little sleepy eyed because it was summertime. And I said, they have to be here at like 6:30, 7 this morning, because all these butterflies are going to be closed today. So the moms sent them over half sleepy eyed, and so we just had a really fun morning while the butterflies were emerging that day. Yeah.
Okay, and that's probably how you were able to get them on. I was like, did you cover them with sugar water or something? I don't know how it had so many butterflies on them. I can never put my finger up to a butterfly and have it climb upon my finger, but
well, you know what it is that there's certain butterflies like the red admiral, and people call it the friendly red admiral because it's attracted to the salt in your perspiration. So people will be like, oh, this butterfly followed me everywhere, and then it landed on me, and then I say, oh, was it brown with red splodges? And they say yes. I said, oh, that's the friendly red admiral, it's drinking your sweat. But what happens with the monarchs when you're filming them is when they first emerge, they can't fly anywhere for the first couple of hours. Their wings are still drying and the wings are still wet. So if you can handle them very, very gently, but they can't fly the first couple of hours.
and those are the ones that kids were
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that explains a lot.
Right. It wasn't magic. No, it was not some magical thing.
I thought I was butterfly repellent. I mean, I could never get them on. I've got a butterfly bush in my backyard, and anytime I approach it, they are.
Yeah, you know what? Also, they're more skitterish in they're more skitterish in July and August. They're much easier to film. The very last generation that emerges, the Methuselah monarchs, they are so intent on nectar. They're not interested in mating at all. They're only interested in building their fat reserves for the journey. So I find them much easier to film and photograph because they just, I can just move the camera right up to them and They wouldn't go anywhere because they just want to get that nectar in them. So.
In the Methuselah, just to make sure I understand, that's the one that's coming, the one generation butterfly that's coming back north?
No,
going
so
south.
that's the one that's going south. Okay. So the one that emerges towards the end of the summer in September, so usually typically say about September, around September, those are the Methuselah monarchs, and they emerge sexually immature, so they are only interested in traveling. They are pulled by the magnetic force. I mean, there's a lot of different theories. One in particular is that they have magnetic receptors on the inner margins of their wings, on the thorax, and that they're being pulled to these volcanic Mexican mountains because of all the minerals. So that's just one theory, but So anyways, the Methuselah monarchs travel 2 to 3,000 miles, depending on where they're coming from, how far north they're coming. And they are the ones that sleep through the winter in Mexico and live, and they're the ones who live for 7, 8, 9 months.
Right.
And that's why they're called the Methuselahs. So they sleep all winter long in Mexico in this state of sexual immaturity. Then when they emerge, when it's time for them to leave the forest, as it's warming, as the earth is warming and beginning to pull them northward, um, some will mate and die there, and some will travel another 1,000 miles north to the first holdover position in Texas on the Gulf of Mexico. So some of these monarchs will have traveled 3,500 to 4,000 miles when they
Right.
die. And then they lay the eggs of the next generation. So
Okay.
it takes 3 or 4 generations to come northward, but only that one generation, the Methuselah monarchs, takes the journey all the way south.
Got it. I completely new to me. I was so fascinating. I had no idea.
Yeah, it's so interesting. People, even when people know, they might have learned, but then they sometimes forget, and then it's mysterious too. It's not everything about their migration and why their migration it isn't entirely known.
Sure.
So you'll notice in the narration, I'll say things like, no, they're pulled by sun and wind, because I don't want to get really super, super specific sometimes about what's going on, because then in 5 years, people say, oh, well, that's not true. You know what I mean? This is not a factual film. So,
Right.
you know what I
Huh.
mean? So
Yeah.
to me, it's a more poetic, magical thing anyway. So I just kind of left it that way.
You succeeded. And I also really like the way you approach the natural cycle, the real birds and bees sequence. You really just very frank and very, this is how it goes down. And love dust.
Oh, I
I had
know, isn't
no
that
idea about the love dust.
it's
So,
it's really, I've heard it used a couple times in scientific papers, and I was just like, oh, I'm going to use that in my film because it's sweet, but it's also butterfly mating can also be very brutal. So I didn't want to go into that because I wanted the film to be appealing to children also, but it can be, especially the ones that emerge at the end of the winter. They can just be like,
yep.
very aggressive. So, but I didn't really want to go into that.
Sure. No. It's
Yeah. I wanted to be friendly and kid
yeah.
appropriate. So
Keep it there.
family friendly. So
That's great. But it was very, I gave an intro you saw earlier this week promoting your film to the viewers at the film fest, and saying, I am so looking forward to spring to come into summer so I can see a monarch butterfly again. And I'm going to appreciate witnessing this monarch butterfly 1,000 times more than I ever would have before I watched this film. And I'm going to try to figure out if it's a male or a female. I'm going to try to look for the black dots in the back and the coloration on the wing, and all of a sudden I just go, wow, this is really much more of a special event than I gave it credit for in the past. And I gave it a lot of credit in the past. So
it's great that you have butterfly bushes, because that brings the butterflies in. But you also, if you plant milkweed, if you plant a patch of milkweed, you will get females in your garden, and they'll start depositing eggs, and you can see the whole life cycle unfold like that. So
we have milkweed galore. We have
we do.
we just let it grow all over the place. I'd like to say we have a design garden, but it's not designed.
Well,
But
you probably have caterpillars galore, and you just haven't noticed.
we do. We look
Oh,
for the eggs underneath and
you
stuff.
do?
But no, we
Yeah.
do. Once in a while, we found some, but not like your film. Your film was prolific at times. There's 3 or 4 of them crawling on one leaf, and I was like, wow. So,
Well, you know what the trick to that is, that so when I bring them into my kitchen to rear them in a terrarium or whatever, they have a 100% chance of survival. out in the wild, then egg only has a 1 in 10 chance of survival
Wow.
because it's almost immediately eaten by a spider or some other kind of critter. So
Wow. Okay.
yeah, so
Someone just chatted in a question there too. I don't know if you can see. Can you see in the chat?
yeah, where does the gold pigment on the chrysalis come from? So it's not exactly known where it comes from. I mean,
Hmm.
it's the chrysalises um, are called chrysalis, as you saw in the film, because that's the Greek word for gold is chrysos. So there are other um, chrysalises that are gold, have golden parts on them, like the black swallowtail caterpillar has parts that are gold as well. But many species of caterpillars have golden chrysalises, so butterflies have golden chrysalises or gold on them. So it's not really known why it turns that beautiful gold. I don't know where it comes from, but my thought about why it's that way is that it's a defense against birds, because when the gold flashes, that's confusing to birds. So you'll see a lot of birds with a lot of butterflies with iridescent patches on their wings, and that iridescence comes from color and from it comes from pigment and from structure. So the gold probably comes from pigment and from structure. But so like the blue morpho butterfly, its wings are blue iridescence on top, and when it flies through the air, it flashes little beams of light, which confuses predatory birds. So I imagine that when a bird is coming into the garden, and if it sees this little flash of gold, it's not going to try to eat it. So that's my theory about why there is gold, to help against predators. So
Right.
an evolutionary kind of thing. So
And just encouraging any other questions out there. I don't see any hands. I was going to ask you, Kim. So what are the projects you're working on now? What's coming up
let's
next
see.
year?
I'm working on 3 long-term projects right now. A lot of what I work on takes place in a short window of time. So the main project I've been working on this winter, I've been filming for the past 5 years, and I've shot enough film for 100 piping plover films, but this is a film about the piping plovers. And I think I'm going to call it The Piping Plovers of Moonlight Bay. I think that's going to be the title of it. And it tells the story of a beautiful pair of plovers that I've been following for the last 5 years, they're just extraordinary parents. They raise other chicks from other broods. So where most piping plovers pairs, only the average is 1.4 chicks per out of a nest of 4. Usually only 1.4 chicks will survive. Well, my piping plover family that I've been filming, the first year I started following them, they raised 6 chicks because they adopted 2 more chicks. and then the following year they double brooded, which is really, that's an extraordinary thing to happen. So where they had 4, a very successful nest of 4, and then they had another nest, and that was very, very rare. A lot of songbirds might have 2 or 3 nests, but it's very rare for piping plovers to have a double brood like that. So anyway, so it's this beautiful piping plover family, and I've been very blessed to have footage of them, piping plovers hatching, and I mean just very wonderful story and footage to go with it. So, and then I'm also working on 2 films about things that happen in my community. The Feast of Saint Joseph. I live in a community where there are many Sicilian families, Sicilian American families,
Huh.
and so there's this wonderful event that takes place every year. It didn't last year, and it's not going to this year. It's the Feast of Saint Joseph, and then also we have this extraordinary wonderful St. Peter's Fiesta every year. And I don't know if you've heard about that or not, but they're both festivals and fiestas that come originally from Italy, but have been adopted by these Sicilian American families in community here that I live in. And so, even though I'm not Sicilian, I have a lot of Sicilian friends and wonderful friends. And it's just, and these also are based in Gloucester too. So my films and stories are really so much based in around my community, because
Sure.
I'm a mom and a grandmother now, and have a business centered from my community. I don't really travel the world, you know what I mean, to to make movies. I like to make movies that I can make around my family schedule. So
You have the world come to you is what happens. They come to your world. And just going back to the piping plovers for a second. So is there, you're covering their life cycle, or what do you, what's the narrative there? I know the location you're associating with, but it's basically, is there a narrative?
Yeah, it's their life story, and it's a narrative too, because I wanted this, unlike the Monarch film, which you can't really make a story about a monarch, because the same monarch doesn't come back to this, you know what I mean, to the same location. This family comes back every year, and even though they're not tagged, many Massachusetts doesn't tag a lot of our shorebirds. They do more wide. We know a lot about piping plovers, where they go in the wintertime, from the University of Rhode Island and the tagging program that they have there. So, but we don't tag butterflies here, but plovers here, but we know because plovers are they're very loyal to, they'll nest the following year within feet of their previous year's nest. So we know that this is the same family that comes back to this one location every year. I call them the clam fam, because they make use of large Atlantic surf clams and use them as camouflage. So I don't want to go too much into the story about the piping plovers, because I don't want to reveal my
Sure.
storyline.
Yeah. No, I was just it's the life of a certain family of plovers in this area, and
it's pretty, this little family is pretty extraordinary. So yeah, and it's, and other aspects of the plovers are so interesting too, because both the male and female plover parents are co-parenting. The male usually arrives first. The male builds all the nest scrapes, attracts the female to them. And then when she starts laying eggs, they both roost the eggs in equal time frames. You know what I mean? Like, he'll sit on the nest for 20 minutes, run off, go feed, and then she'll come back in.
Sure.
And then they also co-parent the entire time with the chicks. And then oftentimes the females depart earlier and leave the area and start migrating earlier than the males do. So the males are often left with 2-week-old chicks who can't yet fly. So I think that's a really, in thinking about all the families today where dads are, just as equal caretakers,
right.
families as the moms are. I don't know. I think it's a good story for today, especially about the blended family and things like that.
All right. I see where you're going. No more. Don't say any more. All right. Well, I'm kind of went through my questions here. I want to make sure I'm not forgetting anyone out there that wanted to ask any questions. I don't see any hands going up. I think part of the reason is because your film was so informative, and you're very informative about what you cover. It seems, even though you won't say you're a professor of butterflies, you sure know a lot about the topic that you cover and are passionate about it, which really comes through in your film. And it's really so. All right, well, I think that's about it. I want to encourage anyone who has seen the film and make sure that you vote, because it's up for Best Documentary Award, a feature-length documentary award. So if you see the film, sometimes people actually come to these Q&As and haven't watched the film yet. So if you're going to watch, keep that in mind. And we're going to be announcing the winners on Monday, and stay tuned for that. But, sorry.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, right? Yeah. So, well, Kim, I really want to thank you for joining us today and talking about your passion and what you do. And it's really awesome. And I really wish you the best of luck, and looking forward to a plover.
Now, I'd like to say one thing, Eric, and that is, I want to thank you for everything that you've done for myself and all the filmmakers. The festival is running so beautifully, and unlike other festivals that my film has been in, it played really beautifully as well. I was very dismayed at in one particular festival, the way the film was showing. It was like, stop and go, and the audio was terrible. So I just want to say that, you've done really an outstanding job of putting on a festival during a pandemic like this. I mean, it's not really, I'm sure it's the hardest thing ever. So
the hardest thing is learning a new thing, and I had to learn 20 new things. But thank you. I'm glad you. I wish I could take credit for the technology part of it. That's where we went with a certain platform, and they came with their own reputation. And I've heard, through the industry. But I'm glad that it looked the way you would want to present it, because
it was really, really. I was really happy with that, because you don't, like, you go out on a limb and you say, okay, everybody come watch it at the Providence Children's Film Festival, and then you just keep your fingers crossed that it's going to look good. Right. So
you give me the high def file, and I'll do good by you. I tell you right now, I'm not going to let you down. So all right, well, I look forward to staying in touch, and best of luck with your future film endeavors.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you. And thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Yeah, thanks.